Imagine a bank heist so daring, it defies belief. No guns blazing, no vaults cracking open. Oh, and by the way, it happens 10,000 feet off the ground. A simple, quiet man in a suit boards a plane, and by the end of the flight, he vanishes into thin air with $200,000. The FBI searched for decades, but they never found him. This isn't a Hollywood script. It's real, and it remains one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. Today we're investigating the mystery of D.B. Cooper, the man who executed the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history. We'll explore the details of his daring crime, the extensive investigation, and the various theories that still swirl around this case more than 50 years later. Let's begin on November 24th, 1971, where a man who identified himself simply as Dan Cooper purchased a one-way ticket for $20 at the Portland International Airport. He was headed to Seattle, Washington, aboard Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short 30-minute flight, dressed in a dark suit, white shirt, and thin black tie. He carried nothing but a briefcase and a paper bag. While his appearance was unassuming, the events that followed would become the stuff of legend. Flight 305 was a Boeing 727-100, a type of aircraft that would later become crucial to Cooper's escape plan due to its unique rear air stair, which could be deployed mid-flight. The plane took off with 36 passengers and 6 crew members, unaware that their flight was about to be hijacked. About 10 minutes after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner, who was sitting near him. Initially thinking it was just another man slipping her his number, Schaffner tucked the note into her pocket without reading it, but Cooper leaned in and whispered, "Miss, you better take a look at that note. I have a bomb." She opened the note, which had been neatly printed in all capital letters, warning that he was carrying explosives. Cooper showed her the contents of his briefcase, wires, and red cylinders, further convincing her that his threat was real. He calmly dictated his demands: $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck ready to refuel the plane when they landed in Seattle. The flight continued without incident as the airline scrambled to meet Cooper's demands. The FBI assembled the ransom in Seattle, $200,000 in used $20 bills with serial numbers carefully recorded, and 4 parachutes, 2 of which came from a local skydiving school. When the plane landed in Seattle, Cooper allowed all passengers and 2 flight attendants to disembark, leaving only the pilot, co-pilot, 1 flight attendant, and a flight engineer. After receiving the ransom and parachutes, Cooper gave specific instructions for the next phase of his plan. He wanted the plane to head towards Mexico City, flying at a low altitude of 10,000 feet with the landing gear down, flaps set to 15 degrees, and the cabin depressurized. He also requested that the plane fly at its slowest possible speed, around 150 knots. These precise instructions suggested that Cooper knew the technical capabilities of the Boeing 727, a key detail that would intrigue investigators in the years to come. Now, let's break down the events of November 24th, 1971, hour by hour, to understand how Cooper carried out one of the boldest heists of all time. Let's try to get inside of his head a little bit. We know that sometime in the morning of the 24th, Cooper, a nondescript man, approaches the ticket counter of Northwest Orient Airlines, identifying himself as Dan Cooper. He pays in cash for a ticket on a 30-minute one-way flight to Seattle. At 2:50 p.m., he boards Flight 305 in Portland, holding a black briefcase. At 3 p.m., as the plane ascends, Cooper passes a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner, claiming he has a bomb in his briefcase. Schaffner glances inside his briefcase, seeing wires, red sticks, and a battery, evidence enough that Cooper was not bluffing. He calmly dictates his demands: $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck ready to refuel when they land in Seattle. The flight crew immediately complies, As the plane continues its route to Seattle, Cooper remains calm, even offering to pay for the crew's in-flight meals. When the plane lands at 5:24 p.m., Cooper exchanges the passengers for his ransom and parachutes, keeping only a skeleton crew on board. With the ransom in hand, Cooper orders the pilot to take off once again, heading towards Mexico City at a low altitude and low speed, around 10,000 feet and 150 knots. He specifies that the plane's landing gear should remain down and that the cabin remain unpressurized, critical details for his plan to jump. Around 8 p.m., somewhere over the thick forest of Washington State, Cooper opens the aft stairs of the Boeing 727 and jumps into the night. The pilots and crew had no idea Cooper had jumped until they landed in Reno hours later. The FBI immediately launched an investigation, combing through the forests of Washington and Oregon, but D.B. Cooper and the ransom money were nowhere to be found. At that time, the FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in United States history. They conducted extensive searches across the forests and mountain ranges of Washington and Oregon, using helicopters, boats, and hundreds of ground troops. Investigators believed that Cooper had jumped somewhere near the Lewis River in southwestern Washington, but the rugged terrain and dense forest made the search nearly impossible. Despite the massive search efforts, neither Cooper nor any significant evidence was ever found, except for a few tantalizing clues, including his thin black tie, which he removed before jumping, which would later provide DNA evidence to the FBI. And several years later, $5,800, which would be recovered by a child. And there are many theories relating to this case. The first and perhaps most popular theory is that Cooper survived the jump. Some believe Cooper was an experienced skydiver who knew exactly what he was doing. Given his specific demands for the flight's altitude and speed, while some of the parachutes provided were military style and could not be steered, others were civilian parachutes designed for sport jumping. If Cooper had experience, he may have been able to navigate through the poor conditions, rain, darkness, and freezing temperatures, and might have landed safely in a secluded area. In 1980, as previously mentioned, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram discovered $5,800 in decaying $20 bills along the banks of the Columbia River, about 20 miles from the speculated jump zone. The bills were later confirmed to match the serial numbers of the ransom money, sparking renewed interest in the case. However, no additional evidence has been found, and the rest of the money remains missing. A competing theory favored by many FBI agents is that Cooper didn't survive the jump. They argue that Cooper may not have been as experienced as he seemed. The conditions of the night of the jump were treacherous. There was heavy rain, cold temperatures, and there were strong winds. If Cooper had missed his intended landing area, he could have easily gotten lost or injured in the dense forest. Without proper equipment or knowledge of the terrain, survival would have been unlikely. The FBI also noted that Cooper chose one of the non-steerable parachutes, which would have made controlling his descent nearly impossible. If he landed in the middle of the wilderness, it's possible that his body and the money are still out there, hidden by the forest. Another theory suggests that Cooper may have had inside help. Some point to his detailed knowledge of the Boeing 727's unique rear air stair, which was not widely known to the public. This led some investigators to speculate that Cooper may have been a former airline employee or someone with military expertise who had knowledge of aircraft operations. In 1978, a placard from a Boeing 727 with instructions on how to lower the aft stairs was found in a remote logging road, miles from any airport. Some believe that this could have come from Cooper's hijacked plane, but the connection remains speculative. Over the years, many potential suspects have been considered, but none definitely linked to the crime. One of the most prominent suspects was Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam veteran and skilled pilot. His military expertise and mysterious past made him a person of interest, but the FBI never found conclusive evidence linking him to the hijacking. Other suspects included ex-cons, thrill seekers, and even former flight attendants, but all leads eventually went cold. Personally, I think there's a very rich dead body waiting to be found in the Pacific Northwest. But what do you think? Could D.B. Cooper have survived? Or did his daring and greed end in an ill-fated final jump? Let me know in the comments below. In conclusion, despite decades of investigation, the case of D.B. Cooper remains unsolved. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016, but the mystery of the man who hijacked the plane, parachuted into the night, and vanished into legend still captivates the imagination of millions. Whether he perished in the wilderness or lived out his days in anonymity, D.B. Cooper's story endures as one of America's most intriguing unsolved mysteries. Now, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of history's most fascinating true cases. And we'll see you next time on the next chilling tale of the Narrator of the Unknown.